Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and I'm also a Labour supporter and fervently anti-conservative. So I'm delighted with the news that the latest poll from one of only two polling companies in the UK that consistently gets it right, YouGov in this case, has returned results suggesting that the Labour membership and trade unionists are backing Sir Keir Starmer to win the leadership election of the Labour Party in the first round. But before I go into my more detailed thoughts, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the first thing I need to explain really is that most people are getting completely the wrong impression about this leadership contest, both within and without the Labour Party. Those supporting Long Bailey would have us believe that Starmer is the centre-left Blairite candidate. He is actually the most left-wing candidate on offer, and his background proves it. From a working-class background, he spent his youth forging a Labour youth group. Later on, he was the co-editor of a Trotskyite magazine. Now, I'm pretty sure, I'm certainly hoping he's not a Trotskyite right now, but you cannot get much more left-wing than that. In fact, I actually don't think you can get more left-wing than that. And his deeds as a smashing success in his chosen field of law also speak for themselves. He offered legal services for free to struggling workers who couldn't pay. And all of this on the way to becoming Director of Public Prosecutions. Quite frankly, the left of the party, which is not a term I really like, because you get these people who will talk about the right. And what they mean is the right of the party. We understand that. That is still the left. But they'll talk about it as if it actually means the right wing of politics. It doesn't. Everyone in the party is on the left. But the left of the party should have been all over Starmer. Absolutely all over him. He should be winning this overwhelmingly. We shouldn't even need polls to suggest this. Most members were fired up by Jeremy Corbyn. Not because of Jeremy Corbyn, but because he would champion a full programme of socialist values. You know, we'd have moved on from the Blair years of dodgy dealings with PFI. There'd be no massive tax breaks for those who were already wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice, no cozying up to Murdoch, and certainly no dubious foreign conflicts just to side with a deranged US president. The problem was that not only was he not an effective campaigner himself, but he surrounded himself with people who didn't have the skills or experience to run up against a slick propaganda machine in the face of the Conservatives, really. If he'd have just done that, then it could have been a different story. And indeed, hopefully would have been a different story. But the result of his decisions was that his public image was completely trashed, and he was bounced into adopting confusing policies that the public wouldn't believe that he could deliver on, because they consistently ignored the data shown by accurate polling. Which was particularly embarrassing because apart from his obsession with Brexit, all of the policies Corbyn was championing were in effect in other major economies in Europe. He wasn't proposing anything new, radical or scary. I mean, they keep using the term radical in Labour. It's not. Nothing they're proposing is radical. Radical means completely new and untested. It's all tested in successful economies. They're just policies that would have allowed us to catch up to more modern nations and redistribute wealth in the interests of almost all of us. For the many, not the few, as he said. So in Starmer, the left should have been embracing a man who stood for those same values, but with the credibility to back it up. Someone who faces up to facts, who listens to people. Here we have the chance to get a manifesto that could at last close the gap between rich and poor, which has now been shown to be reducing the life expectancy of the poorest in this country, with a leader who can sell it to the public, who can actually explain how it's going to benefit them, because that's something Labour never did. I was constantly railing against this. They were constantly talking about how the policies would benefit the poorest and most vulnerable, and that's important. But they should have also been explaining how it's going to benefit general voters. So the image that was getting across to the public was, all right, yeah, you might be good for the poorest and most vulnerable, but that's not me. You're actually not doing any good for me. I'm going to pay for all this, which wasn't true. But because they never talked about that, all we got from that point of view was what the Tory media said. When people were canvassing for Labour last year, up and down the country, and they were being told on the doorstep, these people, they'd normally vote for Labour, but they will not bring themselves to vote for Corbyn. They were asked who they would vote for. And in every single case, in all these constituencies, all these people that have been canvassing, they said the majority of people replied Keir Starmer. And this was backed up in polls as well, so we weren't just going on anecdotal evidence here. All the data that was ignored by Corbyn's campaign team, who let him and the party down very, very badly, was saying that millions of people who used to vote Labour but wouldn't last year would vote for Starmer were he in charge. So why didn't the left, as we call it that, support Starmer? Well, in a way they have. The left is actually split on this. There are many that have moved to the position I adopted some time ago, that the party actually ultimately needs to win. That means compromise. We can't keep thinking of our manifesto being something that's going to get us into government. It's not. Most people don't even read it. They've woken up to political realities, and that an election is won with a campaign, not a manifesto. But there are a large number taking their direction from Momentum who are vehemently opposed to Starmer, not just preferring Long Bailey. And I know they're taking their direction from Momentum because of two things. One, when you ask them to name something bad about Starmer, they cannot say anything that isn't true, and I mean demonstrably true. Secondly, when you say, what have they got in favour of Long Bailey? Again, they cannot come up with anything that, again, isn't a lie. You ask them to back it up, they can't say why. So, I mean, you know, this is it. The Momentum, which is like a cult within Labour that was pushing Corbyn, is now pushing her. Although it has to be said, not overwhelmingly, there's a significant, it's a minority, but it's a significant chunk of Momentum membership are not backing Long Bailey. But why is the leadership backing her? Well, she has no achievements to her name, either in Labour or outside the party, not one. She has no significant following in the parliamentary party. She has no clear views of her own on anything. People saying, oh, she stands for this, she stands for that. How do you know? How do you know? From her speeches recently, those are given to her. She's written no books or pamphlets or essays on any political position at all. That's why they support her. With Long Bailey as leader, you don't get Long Bailey as leader. She's not actually a candidate for the leadership. If she wins the election, then you get three white male dinosaurs, Lavery, McCluskey and Landsman in charge of the party. Landsman being the leader of Momentum. The same people have been poisoning the party over the past few years to the point where now the party is seen as toxic in the public's eye. Consider this. Boris Johnson is unpopular in the country. He's deeply unpopular. He had negative approval ratings. Ordinarily, there is no way the Conservative Party would have allowed him to lead their party into a general election. They did because it's all relative. Labour are even less popular. Someone has to win a seat. But Landsman, the leader of Momentum in particular, and McCluskey, I believe, although I don't think he's said this publicly at least, their view is that Labour in opposition is better than Labour in government as long as they control it. Labour in opposition does them no harm. They get to complain about the Tories and persuade people to give them money for doing so. That's why they support Long Bailey. Not because of her policies, she doesn't have any, but because she will be their mouthpiece. Starmer is on the same page as them in terms of socialist policies, but he won't be a vassal for them. He will not be controlled by them. But trade unionists and members are all in favour of Starmer as leader. And you find this in all demographics as well and all parts of the country as well. It's not like his appeal is just where you've got the most members or anything. It's throughout. His appeal is universal. There are only two groups, when you really drill down, two groups within Labour or associate members who don't rate him as top choice. Momentum members and pro-Brexit members. The latter group especially is a very small minority of the party. And as I've said, although a majority of Momentum are backing Long Bailey because the leader is, there is a good chunk, I think it's about 30% are not. And, even Momentum's influence has been diluted by the fact that there's been an influx of about 100,000 new members to the party since Jeremy Corbyn announced that he was stepping down. And, I'll tell you something, those 100,000 new members certainly did not join the party to see the same mistakes, to see a continuity candidate become elected. So how good news is this if it's borne out? And I stress that, although I think most members will vote early, I certainly have, there are still weeks to go. Starmer has the best chance of taking down Boris Johnson. Whether he can take down the Conservatives in general will depend on his skill in uniting the party. It's one thing to take down Johnson, but remember how the Conservatives operate. If their leader looks like a liability, they just get rid of them. They're utterly ruthless and will put someone else in place. And the public, they will throw all the blame onto that leader. The public will follow that gaze, and then the party becomes absolved of everything that's gone before it. That's how it works. And it does work for them. Now, one thing I do keep saying is messages on Labour groups saying how Long Bailey supporters, they'll get behind whoever wins, but it's a shame that those opposed to her will not get behind her. It's just passive-aggressive bullshit, this. The core of Long Bailey supporters who also support Corbyn, and I mean the core, I don't mean everyone who supports both of those, have never supported Labour in all of my political life. These are the people who attacked Kinnock, they attacked Smith, they attacked Blair, they attacked Brown, they attacked Miliband, and they will attack Starmer. They are hypocrites who will never change. They're saying, oh, we'll back whoever wins, because they just need to say that so that they don't look like hypocrites. But they are. They won't. They spent the last few years blaming Corbyn's shortcomings on those who wouldn't back him, completely ignoring the fact that neither they nor Corbyn have ever backed the Labour leadership since the early 80s. I just have to hope that these people are few enough in number that the party can move forward. Yes, I appreciate that most people watching this are not going to be Labour supporters. Why should I be interested? But I'm pretty sure that most of them have an interest in the current UK government. And frankly, Labour are the only party who can challenge the current UK government. They are the only group in the world that can actually defeat the current UK government. So those are my thoughts. I hope you found them interesting at least. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.